think the main thing that I've learned is that grief and joy can coexist alongside each other. When you first start going out with your friends after I lost my husband, you'd almost feel guilty to experience nice things and he isn't there with the kids and things. But then you can also accept, right, I feel sad because he's missing this, but I can be happy in the present because this is going through that. I think that's really, really important.
Hey, I'm Tanya Wilkinson, and this is Death on the Daily. What happens when the person you love doesn't say goodbye and you're left holding 1,000 unanswered questions? 125 people die by suicide each week in the UK, with it the biggest killer of men under 50. So my guest today comes with a conversation that we all need to lean in and listen to, because the death of her husband to suicide came with no warning. And mental health issues could literally be affecting anyone in your world, with the charity Calm sharing that 1 in 4 of us have suicidal thoughts at some point in our life. Lisa Marshall is a solo mum of 3 after her husband Alan died by suicide. Lisa's been sharing her journey in all of its rawness and messiness of grief through her The Widow Diaries social. And today's conversation feels just so urgent and important as we walk through the whole rainbow of emotions that grief brings, plus crucially, how we can better support each other in our mental health and in our grief. Welcome, Lisa, to Death on the Daily.
Hi, thanks for having me, Tanya.
Oh, it's wonderful to be connected with you today. I would love to dive in anywhere that you wish to in your story and what Death on the Daily means to you.
Yeah, I never thought that death would be a part of my life. And it's crazy because it's a part of everybody's life. It will become a part of everybody's life eventually. It affects everybody, but not at my age. I was 31 when I lost my husband to suicide. But at that point, I had just lost my grandparents, and you feel that that's obviously it's heartbreaking, it's really sad, but it's the kind of passage of life almost. So you can accept it. You can be sad, you can remember have memories, but you can accept it. Whereas losing a spouse unexpectedly and also by suicide, it's been quite difficult. Death is not something I would have spoken about before. And suicide, and I'm sure I'm not the only person that would have shied away from that. There's not really much about suicide in the media, mainstream or anything. I think people they don't like to touch it. It's too triggering for people. And it's not a nice thing to talk about. But obviously that doesn't help people like me that have been left by suicide, and obviously people as well that are suicidal, feeling the kind of stigma towards it as well. So yeah, you feel that it's now became a part of my daily life, and my whole life is hopefully going to build alongside it.
Oh, Lisa, well, thank you so much just for sharing about just how death and grief has become a part of your daily life, because as you shared, it's eventually going to be a part of all of our lives. But equally, I think that there are some, as you shared, with suicide, there's grief that is what we call disenfranchised grief, where actually society hasn't come to that space of accepting it and being able to hold it in conversation and in the right support. And I think the work that you do and how you tell your story is so, so important. And that of your husband. Your husband's name is Alan, isn't it?
Yeah, he was called Alan,
So I'd love to hear anything more that you wish to share around just your journey with Alan, and obviously anything as well, because I think what I find so inspiring about what you do is just you are really open to just going there and being raw and vulnerable about your experience. And to your point, that really does help us to understand actually what is the experience for others who are going through grief from someone who's died by suicide. But also equally, I think to your point, it's really important in the mental health space, as well as obviously for whether it's widows like yourself or any other relation to someone who has died by suicide. I think as well that companionship and knowing that you're not alone in your experience. So I'd love to hear anything that you wish to share just about your journey and your story with Alan.
Yeah, so my journey with Alan, it started when I was 19. So long time ago, kind of my first proper relationship. And we had that kind of just, the way life you think would plan out. We got together, got engaged, bought a house, got married, and then had kids in quite quick succession. So it was 2016, we had our first son, Henry, then Matthew came along less than 2 years later. So I had that two under two, which was absolutely
Oh,
crazy. But it's funny because they're like, my son's going to be, oldest son's going to be 10 this year. And I'm like, how's that been 10 years?
wow.
And then after having two boys, Alan's family is all boys. So I just thought I'd have another boy after having, and then little Sophia came along out the blue completely, like,
Oh,
so she's now 3 years old. So it was just that way that I was on maternity leave and my life was just the way that I thought it would go, that you had plans. And although you never know what life's going to bring, I think when you do get married, you just kind of see yourself growing old with that person. You
mm,
do. You just see yourself just like kind of going through life and watch your kids grow up together. There was never really anything but that I had imagined. I don't think anybody ever has children to, I think they're going to end up widowed or even divorced or separated and doing it alone. Like nobody thinks that when you're doing that. So our life was just like normal family, like mundane life. And that's what I was happy with. We were both worked as dentists as well. Different practices, but we're both dentists. And we met a night out. That wasn't how we met. Like he was like 6 years older than me, 6, 7 years older than me. But yeah, he was just like the funniest person. He was so full of life. And I think everybody that's lost somebody to suicide, the one thing they always say is they'd have lit up a room, like a black room, they would have walked in and just lit it up, like with their personalities. And yeah, there was just like no sign at all in the relationship that he was struggling mentally. So I find that quite difficult now because you're blindsided, but you worry that it could affect anybody else that you know as well because you didn't see that coming. And I thought, like, we were quite in sync. We would always like, I don't know if you're like this with your husband, but it's like you almost like you finish each other's sentences, you would text each other's exact same thing at the same moment. You're so in
mhm,
sync, like your brain. So part of me is just like, how did I not see this coming? How did I just not like see it coming at all? Because it was just so out of the blue, and it'll be 3 years in March. And in some ways it feels like it was just a few days ago. And other times it feels like it's been 20 years. Grief is, there's no kind of time on it. And I honestly, the way I thought that I would grieve would be I'd be really upset for a year. And at that year point, I'd be expecting to be back to normal and back to the way that like I was before. But you know
mm,
yourself, like that person, the version of you is gone when you have your loss. And you have to, especially when it's a spouse, you have
yeah,
to rebuild everything. Like you lose your spouse, but you lose yourself as well because the two of you were like intertwined in every single part of your life. So
mm,
that's been quite difficult to navigate because even though like I'm a solo mum of three kids now, I wouldn't have called myself independent. I basically went from living with my mum and dad to then living with Alan, and I'd never been by myself. So having to like jump from being like married to then be a solo mum, like that's a huge change in itself without the grief on top of it as well. So yeah, sometimes it feels as well that like, has this even happened? Like how is this my life? But I think with a suicide loss, you're so shocked and numb for the first year or so and any sudden death because your brain can't process it. I feel when someone gets a diagnosis, the grief starts probably then if they know it's going to be a terminal diagnosis, whereas a suicide loss, I don't think I properly started grieving until about maybe like a year and a half, 2 years in. So it's just not what I thought grief would be like at all. Like I thought that you would get this big moment of like, that's it, things are fine again, things are back to normal. And you'll probably agree as well that it's something that you carry forward. You'd never move on from it, but you just carry it forward and hopefully like our life's built around it.
yeah, yeah. I think, I mean, what you've just described so powerfully and perfectly is just that grief is just it's a mess. It's a real messy place. But also, I think that to your point, when it's death by suicide and it's something that is so shocking and just it's like the floor falls out from underneath you. I think that acknowledgement of that time of that numbness and actually our body is trying to protect itself,
Yeah.
isn't it? It's basically saying, "This is too much for me to hold right now," I
Yeah.
think is really important because grief can be so, so confusing, but also when we put any shoulds of how I should be grieving or what I should
Yeah.
be feeling right now, actually, as you
Yeah.
shared, it's a process, but also that loss of our identity as well. And I could imagine as well, I'm curious to know because obviously you were at that point a very young mother as well. And I
Mhm.
know that in motherhood, there's a real shift in your identity. And I can imagine as well with
Yeah.
every child that comes as well, there's that that transformation that
Mhm.
happens. And obviously a lot of you falling away. So How was that for you as a young mum? And I know your daughter at the time was very young, I think about 10 months
Yeah,
old, wasn't
yeah,
she? So yeah,
yeah.
how was it navigating this, as well as, I guess, finding your feet as the mum of 3 children, as well as, obviously, as you shared, with that independence that suddenly you had to find in a way that you'd never had in your life before?
I think a lot of people could relate to this, not just by death, but when you're trying to be a mother, when your life is falling apart around you, it's just the hardest thing in the world because it takes every bit of strength to even get out of bed in the morning, brush your teeth, get in a shower. Those things are just so difficult. And the normal things that you would do, like making packed lunches, doing the school run, they now feel like mountains and it takes up all your energy, like physically, mentally. It's so hard, but I'm so lucky that like I had my kids to be a focus, and especially because my daughter, you're right, she was a baby, so she needed like all that care. Whereas if my kids had been older, you'd be at a different stage in parenting, and they might be at a stage where they don't really want to hang about with you very much. They're out with their
Yeah.
friends. But like I was very much like in motherhood, and at the
Mm.
start I found it very, very overwhelming because it's just like there was non-stop. I still to this day have like difficulty sleeping because my mind never switches off. Like you're physically looking after 3 kids, but it's the to-do list in your head. It just is never ending, running a house by yourself, even making sure there's enough food in. And then each child as well has got their own needs to as well. 2 of my children, they're waiting on autism assessments. There's big delays up in Scotland. So that comes with its own kind of set of worries and concerns as well. Constantly liaising with the kind of different like what do you call it? Like schools, nurseries, doctors,
Yeah.
education is just constant. And it's the hardest thing in the world. And sometimes you feel like you don't even stop to come up for air because you're so busy. But having the kids to, keep me going, it comes at a cost, and it means that, and I'm sure like I was probably asked before and so many mums as well, you almost like lose yourself and you forget yourself and you forget to look after yourself while you're looking after the kids. And I was just so ill that first year as well. I was constantly having kidney infections, constantly run down. And I think it's obviously like a wake up call that like you need to look after yourself, but otherwise you're not going to be able to look after your kids. You need to be a happy mum to be happy for your kids as well. So, and then I think that's quite difficult as well because when like I would take any time for myself, like even like going out with my friends a few hours at the weekend, I would feel so guilty for leaving them. But then it's almost like, no, like you have to find an identity that's not just being a mum, because I think before Alan died, I really did just see myself as like a wife and a mum, and that was it. But like you have to almost build a life, and you have to have like hobbies, and I've like reconnected with friends as well to have like a kind of full life that's not just a mum, because you will kind of almost like lose yourself.
Oh, Lisa, I think that is such wisdom that you shared, because when you're grieving, obviously, that the capacity that you have, as you share, I think firstly that acknowledgement of,
Yeah.
it can feel like climbing a mountain to make my kids pack
Yeah.
lunches, I
Yeah.
think is really important, because we need to give ourselves so much grace and compassion and understand. I mean,
Yes.
you shared around the physical symptoms, like the
Mm-hmm.
kidney infections and other stuff. Like for me, it was, yeah, my cycle went completely wacky. It was like proper, I think I broke out in hives because my body got so stressed with the palpitations that I was feeling in my chest, that one day it just almost, I broke through my skin, and I had to go get some of the NHS grade antihistamines to calm it down. But I think that giving ourselves lots of grace through that, but also, as you shared so powerfully, filling our cup up with obviously the rest and the care that we need, but also
Yeah.
those hobbies and those other things to
Yeah.
actually say, do you know what? I can explore all of the different parts of my joys and my identities and my supports and all of that.
Yeah.
It feels like it's so important. And I think what I find when really inspiring, when I see just how you channel yourself through the content that you do online,
Mhm.
is as well how you just hold these conversations of grief, that I feel like in a lot of people with lives as busy as yours is, that actually grief does get just
Yeah.
pushed out of the picture. So yeah, how do you find space for your grief in your busy life?
I felt at the start, I just almost ran away from it. You tried to outrun it. I busied myself so much just with life that there was no time to actually stop and grieve and think and process the death. I also went on holiday quite a lot as well, because taking yourself out your surroundings, and I think that's something that a lot of people do that are grieving, because you think it's going to like obviously cheer yourself up, like everybody loves being on holiday. But then there was one holiday, I think it was last April, and my PTSD just it flared up so badly and intrusive thoughts that I pretty much cried the whole time. And you kind of realise that you can't run away from it. You have to deal with it. And I think that when I feel kind of down now, like I just accept it. And I think the thing is as well is I expected not to have those days where you feel like really low and really down, but everybody has those days. It's normal. You just
Mm.
have to make sure that it's like a balance and it's not all the time, because then obviously like speak to your doctor. It maybe could be depression. But with grief, you're going to have those days where you feel sad. You're going to have those days where you have like one thing where you have a normal day, and a reminder, a trigger could just set you right back and just really like almost ruin your day. But like I think when that happens, the main thing is rest. Is your body just needs to rest, and then maybe like I would try and like socialize. But then I think actually it's more important to just almost, you don't want to like hide away. You want to tell like your friends and family like I'm not feeling great right now. But
Mm.
sometimes like I find socializing it's exhausting when you're having a hard time, and just like how busy as well life is too.
Yeah.
So I definitely try and like handle it differently and not distract myself, but almost just sit in the feelings and realize like what triggered this. Is there anything I can do in the future to try and stop that? And once you kind of work through the feelings, and hopefully it won't be as bad in the future. So I think the main thing is to first of all accept your feeling and just feel them. That is the main thing. Like you have to feel to heal, definitely.
I love that. You have to feel to heal, exactly that. And I think for me, in feeling to heal, I found that it's not as scary as it feels, to that avoidance, because I feel like it, given, well, I think our societal conditioning, but also my family definitely is grief and death avoidant. But I feel like
Yes.
I'm on a constant journey of just calling myself out and being like, to your point, am I just filling my schedule up? Am I packing it
Yeah.
with stuff to avoid me
Yeah.
feeling how I'm feeling? Or am I scrolling on social media or other stuff where I can just go there and it feels easier? As soon as I
Hmm.
start feeling, as soon as I just put one little finger into the feelings of my grief, of how I'm
Hmm.
really feeling, avoiding the "I'm fine" reflex that I still also am
Yeah.
working on, I actually have found that it's, yes, of course, it's painful,
Hmm.
but I've been really surprised at the depth of what I can hold, and it's been something where actually that's been one of my biggest lessons of being like, "Oh, wow, myself and every other human on this planet can hold all of this," because actually grief is, it's inherently human. It's a part of our humanity, our existence. So, yeah, I'd be really curious to know what you've learned about yourself and how you can hold the all of the feelings and the experience of grief in your journey.
I think the main thing that I've learned is that grief and joy can coexist
Oh,
alongside each other.
yes.
And I think that's a really important one, because when you first like start going out with your friends after I lost my husband, you'd almost feel a bit guilty for having a good time. You'd almost feel guilty to experience nice things and he isn't there with the
Yeah.
kids and things. And you feel guilty that he's missed like my daughter took her first steps, first words, things like that as well.
Yeah.
But then you can also accept, right, I feel sad because he's missing this, but I can be happy in the present because this is going through that. I think that's really, really important. And I think as well that like sometimes like when I go to weddings and it's like I'm so, so happy for my friends, but obviously you're going to be a little bit like, oh, that was me. That it takes you back to your own wedding day and things as well. And you have that wee tinge like, oh, that used to be me. You can have those feelings alongside each other, and they can almost like rest beside each other as well. Because I think I would try and be like, oh, I can't be feeling this way. Like I need to shut this down and not feel that way. I just need to be happy, when no, it's human and it's normal. It absolutely is. And it's quite toxic in the beginning, because I would get like the biggest jealousy just seeing a random dad like with a wee girl, because it would remind me of like what I've not got. It would be really, really intense. Like seeing full families, it would be really, really intense. So, and it's not like that now, but I think that's just absolutely normal. And just because the grief is so traumatic and intense in the beginning, definitely.
Yeah, I think that's so important to acknowledge all of that jealousy, guilt, the emotions that we push into the shadows because it feels shameful. It feels like we shouldn't be feeling that. Oh my goodness. But actually they are totally, totally valid. I feel you there. And also in that, I think what's really beautiful about what you shared is actually we can also see that there is a duplicity or a multiplicity present at any one time. So actually, because I can really resonate with that, it doesn't happen so much now, but even still, there is a little bit of, particularly around the 20-week scans, when people are posting them on social media, and I'm like, "Oh, that was my point where my world fell apart." But actually, to your point, I'm always like, "Oh, yeah, that's awesome. Go them." And then can also hold hope in my heart for the future. And so
Yes.
there's again that multiplicity that is present in that
Yeah.
moment, alongside honoring, as you shared, the fact that actually there is that little twinge of saying, "Oh, whether it's jealousy or whether it's something that triggers something." I have that. I think also even just acknowledging what our triggers are is really, really powerful. Like, I realized that because we're not far from the hospital, and I've realized that actually just driving past the hospital can trigger my nervous system because of the last time that I went in there. So actually just knowing that, and to your point, a little bit earlier around in giving ourselves the rest and the care that we need,
Yeah.
can also
Yeah.
just help to signpost to us, okay, how can I tend to this trigger or this jealousy? How can I look at it in a way that's going to also connect me into the joy, or
Yes.
whatever that is? I think to your point, there can be a real alchemy when we
Mhm.
allow ourselves to be present with those emotions and to say, okay, I see you, jealousy, I see you, guilt, or
Yeah.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
What do you actually mean? What are you trying to tell me? Because all of our emotions, they're just little messengers, aren't they? Trying to tell
Yeah.
us something. And to your point, if we just push them away, I think that they can become little gremlins in the shadows.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like you almost feel that shame to feel them.
Yes,
Anger's a really big one with a suicide as
yes.
well, the anger. And that's quite difficult because you can't walk about being angry. You don't want your kids to see you angry, but that's a big one. And that can be quite like underlying as well
Mm,
because you're angry at someone who's dead and is never going to be able to argue with you. That's the thing. So where does your anger go? There's nowhere to direct it. So I think that's a big one. I think then you get angry and then you feel guilty for feeling angry as well because you're like, why am I angry at my husband? Like, is the suicide is almost like you love that person so much, but then you almost hate them for what they've done and like choosing to die because their pain ends, but the pain that it leaves behind is just it's unbelievable.
mm. That's such an important one, I think, and anger's such a big one.
Mhm.
And as you shared, particularly when it comes to death by suicide, and I think in our society, just in general, we push anger into the shadows, and there is definitely that. I think particularly for women as well, there's that stigma around don't be angry, don't be moody, or whatever it is. One question for you, because you mentioned around some really complex narratives that you hold that are totally
Mhm.
valid and justified for you to be asking those questions and feeling that
Yeah.
anger. How have you navigated these when it is these really difficult parts of anger and of things that are directed at Alan and that side of things? Yeah, how have you navigated that?
I think the main thing is to notice when you are angry because sometimes it could just be like you're a bit short with the kids or you're arguing with like your mum. It can come out in other people. So realizing like actually this is not about like that at all. Any of these little things. It's actually about the bigger picture. And it's usually when I'm like struggling, like if I'm struggling being a solo parent and I just could use an extra pair of hands, or if the kids are upset about missing their dad, obviously you're going to get angry. But, and just I think the main thing is obviously show yourself that that's okay to be angry and, like, use that energy. Like, I'm quite bad, like, I'll just start cleaning frantically, but
Yeah,
exercise might be a good way to kinda let it out
yeah,
as well. And people tell you should go and, like, scream into a pillow, things
yeah,
like that, just to let it out. But then obviously, like, showing the kids, like, it's okay to be angry, it's okay to be sad,
yeah.
and explain why, because I think that's the thing as well, is that, like my generation, I'm sure yours as well, you're taught to kind of suppress your emotions, and
Mhm.
especially for men, like if they're struggling, like Alan never said anything, and he was very much like he went to the football, he was like a guy's guy, so like he never really opened up about his emotions, and then I feel like that is the result what's happened because he just couldn't open up. Like men would rather die than open up and be seen as vulnerable, so it's important to kind of teach like my kids that you need to tell somebody when you're not okay and when you're angry, it's okay, like, as well, definitely. There's always help, there's always an answer, and just knowing with myself that I'm having a really hard, angry day, but it'll pass, and it might not pass tomorrow, but it will pass and it'll get through it. And probably a few weeks' time, you won't remember why you were angry in the first place. Definitely.
Oh, wow. I love that. I think what I find really powerful in that, well, firstly, is just in those changing those toxic patterns that are just laid down into our society. Because I think that if I think about my childhood, it was definitely parents who suppressed their emotions. Obviously, they used to get angry with us and annoyed, but that was when we were being naughty. Different to us witnessing them in their vulnerabilities. I think that that's really, really powerful because that's how we change our ancestral lines and change our ripple effect into the world, and just that impact on our children, I think, can be so, so, so powerful. But also that acknowledgement of the impermanence of our anger, I think, is a really powerful one because in grief in particular, I think things can feel like your world just shrinks into just your experience, and it feels like you're never gonna get out of here. But I think just having that acknowledgement of everything is impermanent, including this emotion, is a really powerful one. For me in my grief, what I've learnt is that I actually liken it to when I was giving birth to our daughter in her stillbirth and the contractions of grief. And the midwives, they found me very curious because I was sort of giving them a running commentary from a grief perspective of how everything was flowing and how I was feeling, and they just loved it. We had loads and loads of chats, but I remember with one of them, and I said it was after a contraction, and I had that moment of relief, and I just said, "This is grief." I said because what I've witnessed in my grief in the days leading up to her stillbirth is there might be a really terrible day, but then there's a day, the next day might feel vaguely normal, still
Yeah.
sad,
Yeah.
but I can move about everyday life and it doesn't
Yeah.
feel like I'm having to climb a mountain to do everything. So in that
Mhm.
moment, I realized that just like the contractions of birth, there's also those contraction and then there's that release. There's that moment where you go, okay, I can see the joy around, I can see the opportunity and life and hope and reconnect into that. But that's just given me permission to say, actually, in this moment, I can just be with whatever I'm feeling because I know
Yeah.
that this isn't going to be for the rest of my life.
That's such a good way to look at it, and I've never thought about grief like that, but you're so right, it is, and I feel it's like emotional whiplash as well, like, sometimes it's back and forward, definitely, especially around Christmas time, it's just and that joy's, like, shoved in your face, and you're feeling sad, so no, I totally relate to that, what you're saying.
Yeah, and such an important acknowledgement, I think, around those
Mhm.
really difficult times of year where it is, let's be joyful, let's be happy.
Yeah.
Permission to not
Yeah.
be. And I think as well, because throughout the year there are also all the other stuff, like I'm sure Mother's Day is very different for you now as a solo parent, Father's Day, obviously. And I think there's all these times of year as well where we need to be really compassionate to ourselves and say, actually, do you know what? If this feels just awful, then that's okay.
I find as well that everybody, and I did as well, we expect the big days like Christmas Day, their birthdays to be the hardest, but the parts that I miss the most, it's the mundane day-to-day stuff. It's like going to the shop and seeing something that they would have liked and being like, oh, like you would have picked that up, and like wanting to text them when you just something funny happens, things like that. That is the bits that can kind of like hurt the most rather than the big, big days as well. And on the big occasions as well, you know yourself, usually have people kind of around you and kind of like checking in and things like that. But I find the day to day and the small everyday moments, they're just as hard, if not harder, than the big anniversaries. The build up's always worse than anniversaries I found than the day itself. The day it's each anniversary, I feel it's almost a relief because it's like, right, I've got through it, I can do it, definitely.
I think that's really interesting because actually, if I think about my grief coaching, there's so many times where with a client we'll be really working together in the anticipation, the lead up to Christmas, to anniversary, to a birthday, and then in the session afterwards, they go, "Oh, actually, the day was all right. I think it will
Yeah.
be thinking about
Yeah.
it a lot before." And exactly to your point, then it can just hit us completely out of the blue when we're in the supermarket or just
Yeah.
wandering down the road,
Yeah.
something in our subconscious just triggers. And I think actually what you beautifully leaned into there is also those moments where people check in and support us, but those moments where obviously everybody goes back into
Yeah.
their own lives as usual and don't quite think to check in. So what advice would you share for, and I want to come on to obviously people who've been bereaved by suicide, and particularly widows who've been bereaved by suicide. But firstly, what would you say to anyone who has someone in their world who is grieving someone who's died by suicide? What advice would you give to them about how they can wrap that person in a bubble of their care?
I think a lot of people would be scared and what to actually say to them. Like, I can imagine people texting me, like, I don't even know what to say here. I don't know how to write a message saying, I'm so sorry, but there's nothing anybody can really say that's like worse than what's already happened to me. I think the worst thing they could do is back away. And like, you've had that where people, they cross the street instead of speaking to you, they turn their head to you because they just don't want to deal with it. And that's like, it's their problem, not really mine. But obviously at the time when you're in grief and you're feeling sad, you can't help but take it like everything like that personally as well. So I think the main thing that they could do for the person grieved by suicide is just hold space and just be there. And I think I probably needed more support kind of after the first year and second year, because as you'll know, when something traumatic happens, like absolutely everybody, like they come at the woodwork and they're there and you're getting constant like checking in. But over time, like, everybody's life go back to normal. And I think that's just the way humans are kind of programmed. Like you see TV shows where someone dies and the next episode everybody's back to normal. They're not even talking about that person anymore. So people just think after the funeral, right, that's it, back to normal again. Because when I've like seen like my mum and dad when they've lost their parents, they're back at work the next week as if, and it's just like you think that's normal when
Mm.
it's not. It's just society. So I think the main thing is to like they're going to need support, but it's not going to be like all at the start. It's just be there for like kind of as you would normally throughout life and just hold space. And sometimes the best thing they can do is just kind of just sit with me. And like whether you want to talk about what's happened or talk about normal stuff, because quite a lot of time, especially with my friends, you want to just talk about your normal stuff you're talking about and like nice stuff and like happy stuff and feel like you're normal and you've not went through this kind of loss and trauma, definitely. And if I think a lot of people as well, they're like, what can I get as a gift to somebody that's lost somebody by suicide? And so many people sent flowers. You'll be the same, like flowers, like lots of restaurant vouchers, food deliveries, but just anything like even if somebody sent like the smallest thing, I still felt like that person's thinking of me, and that is just so so kind. So there's nothing that you can get that's wrong or not wrong. But I think if somebody said to me like, let me know what you want or if there's anything I can do, like I'm not going to let you know because I can't even think straight. So I'm not going to be like, I need this. So like I had friends that were like, I'll take the kids' uniform and iron it for you and bring it back.
Oh.
I'll clean your house. I'll do this. Like they wanted to be very practical and help me. But then again, I was also like, I don't need any help. I don't want any help. So I very much pushed it away.
Mhm.
But I think they're going to have to think practically and actually show up to their house with like food on their doorstep and just leave it, because otherwise, like, you're not going to say, oh, can I get this? They're not going to reach out. But you can have those really tough days still kind of years down the line. But your friends aren't going to know that unless like I communicate, like I'm going through a really hard time here. So that's that as well. It's like they can't read your mind. It's difficult. And they might think that you're okay because as you'll know yourself, when they ask you how are you, you'll be like, I'm fine. I'm doing fine. Yeah.
Yeah. That I'm fine. I'm definitely in that I'm fine brigade. I'm not asking for help. And I think that those check-ins are so powerful. But I think what you shared so beautifully is there's two sides to it. There's obviously the side of giving space so that when we're having a terrible day, we have someone who says, just checking in, and I am open to receiving anything, any tears, no matter how snotty it gets, no matter if you want to. I had my cousin who was just said to me, if you want to be pissed off, we can go to the forest. I live by Epping Forest, and we can throw around some rocks and kick piles of dirt. We can do I will swear with you, it's those friends who can meet you in whatever you are. But also with that acknowledgement that actually the joy, I love what you shared around sometimes it's just, tell me something that's joyful for you. Let's talk about stuff that helps to just in that restoration oriented processing, helps me to connect back into life as it flows. And I think also that acknowledgement that the check-ins are so meaningful to continue
Yeah.
into the years ahead, because I feel
Yeah.
you there. For me, this third Christmas since was, I think this was probably, bar the first one, this was my most tender Christmas since. And I love that you mentioned around TV shows, because that's really got me thinking about the role that the stories
Yeah.
we see in popular culture, etc., has to play in it. Because you just never hear their names uttered ever again in your
Yeah.
favorite TV shows or anything. But actually,
Yes.
I think that we need to have that acknowledgement, because so many people are suffering in silence because there just isn't that space to be able to utter their loved ones' names, speak to it, say how they're really feeling.
Yeah, and I think the media as well, they play a big part because they, like, it's probably my own fault because I read the Daily Mail, so that kind of says everything. But they really go for like widows that have maybe lost a spouse, and then they'll be pictured with a new partner maybe like 6 months later, a year later, and they try and get headlines, they try and get a reaction, like clickbait comments and things like that as well. And like I'm still single, I haven't met anybody, but I think when I would like look at a widow on the media and if I seen them maybe with somebody else, I'm like, oh, that's great, good for them. They must be over it and moved on, when it absolutely isn't. So I think it's the media plays a huge part in it. And they almost, I feel they go for female widows and like they want people to have a bad negative reaction, but male widows, it's like, oh, that's amazing, that's great. Like they've moved, they have definitely. So I feel that's played a part as well in it, because I just like thought that like widows, like they would maybe just when they met somebody else, everything would be okay. When it isn't like that at all. You have no idea how somebody's feeling on the inside and the grief that they carry as well.
Wow, that's really interesting about that. It feels like media's got a big part to play in not being biased in how they portray widows, but also from the perspective of having a more realistic, more compassionate lens on everything, and just how it has to come through all threads of our society, which is where storytelling that you do, that is rooted in your lived experience. I think the more of us that can share our stories, the more that actually we can create that positivity bias, not just the positive stories, but from the perspective of actually, let's just share the realness of grief. Let's do it in a way that is going to be supportive of other people. And with that in mind, I would love as well to hear any of your words of advice to anyone who's been widowed by suicide. But actually, also, I was wondering if within that, because I'm always so aware that there was so much that was left unanswered for you, and that being a very difficult part of your journey forward. So I'd love to hear any of your words of advice to anyone who is navigating a similar path.
Your life is going to look so different, but that's okay. It's hard to grieve the life that you had behind with being the marriage and the kids and the kind of perfect family unit that you thought. And when it happened to me, like I thought my life was over. Like I didn't think I would get through the next week by myself with the kids. And I just remember every week being like the Tuesday being like, oh, I'm still here. It's been 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks. I'm still here. I'm still kind of living. I was probably just existing and not living, but I was still here, still kind of showing up for the kids. But your life, it isn't over. And you're never going to find meaning. Like I'm never going to think like, oh, Alan died for a reason, because you'll never find meaning in death. And that's when people like say to you like, oh, everything happens for a reason and things. You're like, really?
Oof.
But that can also like live alongside that, like you have to find meaning in your new life and try and find joy in other places. And I think as like marriage, like I kind of just like had behind Alan a lot of the time. He was the more confident one, he was the more funny one, he was the more social one. So I felt very vulnerable, and you have to kind of get to know yourself as well. You have to, first of all, forgive yourself. Not forgive yourself for like thinking that it was anything to do with you, because it's not. And that's really difficult being widowed by suicide, because I felt really rejected after it. I felt my self-worth had gone. I felt, if I was good enough, then he would have stayed. And you have to accept that there's nothing that I could have done to stop it. Nothing, it was nothing really to do with me almost, because if someone takes their own life, it's on them. It's on them. It is definitely. And again, like the media kind of portray that, if somebody was like very, very badly bullied and things, that they kind of obviously almost look at somebody to blame. And I think for me, I'm quite a logical thinker. You want somebody, you want a reason, you want the logic, you want somebody to blame, but you're never going to have that with a suicide. And that's okay to not have the answers. You just have to almost make peace with it and just realise that you'll never know, because the only person that knows is dead. That's the thing.
Wow.
And it's more complicated being widowed by suicide than being widowed by cancer, for example.
Yeah.
And it's because of the unanswered questions. It's because, I never got to say goodbye.
Mhm.
There was no plan. There was no kind of preparation for it. So I have joined widows groups and I have made friends that have been widowed, but the ones that I really connect with are the ones that have been widowed by suicide. It's just a different kind of loss.
Yeah.
So I would kind of more hone in on trying to find suicide bereavement groups because they'll kind of help you feel understood and feel normal. When someone says, "Oh, I felt this," you're like, "Oh, I felt that too." You don't feel guilty of it. I almost don't want to like trauma dump on my friends. You're not going to say a lot of the things you feel about grief to friends that haven't experienced that, but you will to people that are being in your situation. And the ones that are kind of further down the line, like I really, really look up to them and they give me so much hope that, they're still here. I can do that too and get through it. But yeah, it's going to be hard. And anybody that messages me asking for advice, I'm just like, it's going to be hard. And if I was to sit here and be like, "Oh, my life's been really easy, straightforward," it absolutely is not. But you can I still have moments of joy, and that's the main thing. You just have to find joy in the little things, definitely. And I'm sure you do as well.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's it's really important. Well, obviously in finding joy, but also in finding those kindred spirits where actually there is that
Hmm.
shared lived experience. Because
Yes.
yeah, there is no substitute for sitting in a group where they really get it. And to your point
Yes.
as well, where you can say stuff that definitely you'd say to anybody else about your experience, about where there are these unanswered questions, etc. And of course, they can, even the best, very best space holders, there is no substitute for someone who's like, I
Yes.
really get that. I can put my hand
Yes.
up and say I hard relate to that and can
Yeah.
speak from their own lived experience. I think that's really wise
Yeah.
wise advice, because actually there are so many charities out there. I think for every kind of bereavement there will be support groups and charities and
Yes.
spaces where you can absolutely reach out and connect in with other people with that same experience. But also I think what's really powerful as well is when there's a death that is literally just the floor is pulled out, it collapses underneath you in that shocking moment. Actually, what I could hear so powerfully from what you shared is giving yourself, what came through for me was giving yourself that space and that grace as you navigate that forward path, and understanding how you'll change. Because when you mentioned around Alan and his confidence and he's funny, I was thinking about everything that I know about you as you in
Oh,
your who you are now, and I was like, that
yeah.
is hilarious and really super confident and just incredible. And so I think what's really interesting is circling back onto that identity side of things. And for me, actually, I think looking at where I am now, and then looking at where you are now and hearing your story of your before and after, actually I think there is so much growth that can come through our grief, that butterfly emerging from the cocoon. It doesn't take away the hurt, and it doesn't take away the fact that we would always in a heartbeat give it all up to have our loved ones still here with us. But at the same time, I think that for any of us who've been through this and who journey forwards, it's about taking those moments to just really stop and honor and say, wow, look at how far I've come. Even if it's just in those periods of feeling like getting out of bed is climbing a mountain. Look look at me go.
Yeah, oh, that's so nice. Definitely. I think that's it. And because you're just in it, you're living in the grief, you don't really take a step back to see, oh, like, look how far I've come. And, like, especially starting the new year when everybody has their what they've done for the new year. And I still felt like I've done like nothing when I have, like, even getting out of bed, taking the kids to school every day, that's been a huge achievement, definitely. Doing it solo parenting for a whole year by myself, like, the whole like last 3 years. Like it's a huge achievement, definitely, but it just doesn't feel like it. So we do need to give ourselves more grace, absolutely. And because healing is messy and it's quite rocky at the start as well. Like I would go out quite a lot to try and deal with the grief. I was drinking more as well. But in that moment, you're just trying to survive. And that's it. That's it. And I think that's what I wish people would realise more, that when you see somebody that's grieving out looking happy, that's not them moved on, that's not them okay, that's them just trying to survive. That's it.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that us having that awareness as well of the fact that, yeah, someone who's out there partying, looking happy, could be in survival mode. I wonder, because for me, yeah, with my awareness, with these conversations, with my own journey, knowing how I numb, I would hope that I could also be that friend, even just to do that little check-in. If I'm thinking they might be are they avoiding their grief, or maybe they just don't have space in their life. Anyone, maybe it's that unconscious busyness. It's the fact that you just don't have any friends or family where you feel like you can have that conversation. I think again, that's where those little gentle check-ins can be really powerful to say, "Hey, how are you? It's been a year or however long since so and so died. How are you feeling in that? Is there anything that you want to speak about?" Could be really powerful. And one final question for me that I think it's just come through as it feels really, really important for us to give space to this before we close out on this conversation is around mental health. And obviously within our world, there is it's definitely much, much better, but there is obviously still conversations that don't happen, and there is still stigma around mental health, around suicide. So what do you want the world to know about mental health, about suicide? What do you feel like we need to change in our world or shift our perspectives on it?
Suicide can affect absolutely anyone, any age, any gender, any job, anybody. I used to think before listening to suicide that it doesn't happen in people that have got kind of just normal lives and they've not faced a lot of trauma, poverty, hardship. But mental health can affect anybody. Nobody is exempt. And you need to ask for help. Even just telling one person they would rather help you than be at your funeral. Alan must have had like 1,000 people at his funeral, and it's so hard to see how many people that cared and loved them and would have done anything to help him, but it was obviously too late.
Mhm.
So I just think that's the main thing. Suicide, it can affect anybody, and just make sure you get help, and also be more aware of people around you as well that might be struggling and might be hiding it and might be masking it as well. Have those conversations like, are you okay? But no, how are you really? Like, ask them again
Mhm.
and just make sure, especially that men in that, the classic 30s to 40s age group, that is the biggest cause of suicide. It is.
Yeah.
Obviously, I know from losing my husband, sometimes it's the happiest, kindest people and people that check in everybody else. Sometimes you're the ones that, they can't get help themselves. And it's so sad, but yeah, more needs to be done. Just so, so much. There's not enough services for people that are struggling mentally, not enough help out there. I know the NHS is just stretched to the limit, and unless you can pay privately, it's quite difficult to access help. And I think mental health, it needs to start from childhood. It does, definitely, because I think a lot of adults are carrying childhood trauma well into adulthood, not dealing with it, and then just can't cope, definitely.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's really important, that acknowledgement. It has to start from childhood, but also the role that we can each play, as you shared in those check-ins. But I thought what was really powerful was actually because there are always those people who, like Alan, will be the one who's just really kind, checking in
Mhm.
on everybody else.
Yeah.
And actually, even that of being able to say, okay, is there that one friend where they are always there and checking in on you? But actually, do I then ask them and say, yeah, how are you
Yeah.
doing? How are you doing at the moment? It's
Yeah.
been a while since we checked in,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
saw how everything is for you. All of those conversations are so important, but also to your point around that reaching out and feeling like it's not a weakness to reach out to say to somebody, actually, I'm struggling, or to contact whether, because I can fully appreciate, I feel like our health services are definitely overloaded, and I wish that there was more mental health support. But at the same time, there's also loads of charities, and also it's always good to go and have a chat with your doctor, because you just never know where you might be able to get on some waiting list and get some support.
I feel a lot of people as well struggle with mental health. I think they feel they're a burden. They don't want to annoy anybody. Don't want people worrying about them. Don't want to contact anybody. And that's why like lives are getting lost as well. So it's just to make that first step and just tell somebody like, I am struggling. And the thing with suicide as well, the best description of it I've ever seen, and I always get it wrong when I say it, suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. It is.
Oh, wow.
It really, really is. There's nothing that can't be fixed.
Wow.
And, I actually met somebody who came to a group and he attempted to take his own life. And when he was trying to, somebody actually said, do it tomorrow. And you think, what? Why would you say that? Somebody like, do it tomorrow. He's still here now, because just that perspective of one more night and
Wow.
realizing, and still here. And I'm not saying people they have attempted suicide, like the life is going to be easy.
Mhm.
There's going to be challenges. They're going to have like obviously battles to go through as well.
Yeah.
But I feel as well like the person that's missed out on everything here is Alan. It is like there's so much life. As long as there's life, there's hope. There's hope. I mean, as much as I obviously miss my husband, my kids miss having a dad, like we still have life, we still have joy, whereas he's the one missing out. So there's always hope and there's always life, definitely.
Oh, there's always hope. There's always life. That's so, so powerful. And I think that's really beautiful. Just that actually this is something where there is so much support out there for you. So
Yeah.
reach out. And I love that as well when you shared, don't feel like you're a burden, because I think we can, and we can deprioritize ourselves. We can
Yeah.
deprioritize our mental health. We can say, oh, I don't want to be a burden to, whether it's my doctor, whether it's my friend,
Yes.
whether it's my family,
Mhm.
whether it's I don't want to reach out to this charity or whatever it is. It's these places are here for you. And actually, we humans, we are interconnected beings. We live and we thrive on our connection to each other. But that's not just in the joy, that is also in the very difficult times. We can hold each other through this and walk through it together. So I think that's really, really powerful to end our conversation, Lisa. But before we
Thank
do,
you.
I would love for you to share with our audience just where can they find you and anything else that you wish to share in this space.
That's fine. So I am on Instagram and TikTok. It's same handle. It's _Widow Diaries. And I kind of post there. I try and do daily, but it's difficult to post with having 3 young children. It is, but I love connecting with widows, people that have experienced grief as well. So yeah, that's me.
I would definitely recommend giving Lisa a follow. Your content is so real, so raw, but also you show all of those different aspects of your life in the griefiest bits, in the joy, and how you've navigated that forwards path and in those milestones for you as a widow. So I just want to say thank you so much for joining me today, Lisa, on Death on the Daily. And yeah, I look forward to continuing our conversation in the future.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Tanya. It's been an honour to be your guest today. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me on Death on the Daily. If you liked this episode, it would mean a lot if you could hit subscribe. Plus, head to the show notes to find out about my work as a grief coach, and there's a grief journaling freebie there for you. Until we meet here next time, take good care of yourself and others.
There's a cold fire, there's a crossfire, and there's something